All right, warriors, I have a guest for us today. I have Sonia on the show. Thank you for coming on.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm really delighted to be here.
I am thrilled, and I would love it if you could give us a little background for my listeners, and if they're watching on YouTube, people who have not heard of you, what inspired you to write your books and do the work that you are doing?
Well, actually, this is one of those crazy things in life. Writing was my passion, and that's what I wanted to do when I grew up.
Hmm.
And somehow I got sidetracked into pursuing instead a corporate career and then a legal career. And then I became, for health reasons, I had to retire from litigation practice. And I was able to be my own boss. And by the way, the best boss I've ever had.
So good.
Yes. And I decided, hey, this is the time for me to, pursue my dreams. And I went to a woman's retreat regarding forgiveness. And I noticed that there were a lot of women who were reeling from past divorces and some who were hurting in their current marriages. And I thought, this is a great opportunity for me to share my personal and professional experience as a lawyer and also as a survivor of a toxic marriage and divorce.
Mm. Oh, yeah. Oh, I didn't know that you had gone to a retreat on forgiveness. And that is such a big piece that I will touch on later in this podcast, because that is where so much of, I think, misunderstanding is around like what forgiveness means. And then also that's where so much of my freedom has come, and just forgiving others for myself. But I'd like to go to one of your books that I really appreciate, because I too was in a toxic marriage and am out of it, and it is very helpful on this side. And yet for many years, I didn't realize that that's what I was in, 19 years, I think 6 years of dating before that, thinking this was all normal, that this was what, this is what life is. And in one of your books, you speak about how we can sort of go through life asleep and operating on this sort of unconscious or asleep patterns that were programmed by our parents, modeled by our parents or by society or by freaking Disney, for goodness sakes. And this really resonated with me, because that was absolutely my experience, that when I was in this relationship, I was sort of like, well, isn't this what it's all about? And yet I felt empty and stuck and flat and really upset. Could you speak to that a little?
Yes. And the premise of my writing is the teachings of Anthony DeMello, who, in addition to being a Jesuit priest, he was also a psychotherapist. And he said that most people don't know it, but they're born asleep, they live asleep, they marry in their sleep, they have children in their sleep, and they die in their sleep without ever waking up. And that is the reality for most of us. Social programming is the reason why we go through life asleep, with that narrative that has been created for us, right? We're told to graduate from high school, then we go to college, then we get married, we have 2.3 kids, we work for 40 years, retire and die, and then you wonder, is that all there is? You play by the rules, you do what you're supposed to do, and then you wonder, why am I not happy? And that is very true in relationships, because we are brought up with all these ideas of what relationships are supposed to mean in our lives. We think that we are not complete on our own. We get Jerry Maguire, you complete me, right?
Yeah.
We think that we're not complete. We need to be part of a couple to be validated, to be acceptable. We have to have children. We have to marry someone from our particular social group or race or religion. And we are just living narratives that have been passed down to us by our social institutions, like parents and teachers and the church and the media and all the messaging that we're getting from all over the place. And it is very self-destructive, because we're not really living authentic lives. We are living lives that have been prepackaged for us.
Oh, I'm like, yes, yes, and yes, all of that. And I very much, I call it my midlife awakening. It was around age 35. So it speaks to this asleep part, where I just felt like I had this little like tap, 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 like, hello, what is going on? And it was this you even use these words like, is this all there is? And I had that, luckily, I think around 35, and it wasn't 85, but that idea that, hey, wait a minute, I followed the rules. Like I was that people pleaser, high performing, perfect little girl, and did what you told me to do. And I don't feel happy. I feel completely flat.
Yes, that was me too. And it happened to me very young.
Okay, so that's helpful, I think. And I think that there are a lot of listeners who will resonate with this feeling of feeling like, okay, well, this is good. Is this as good as it gets? And this is good enough. And I don't feel like I thought I would feel when I got to this point, but I do. And I guess this would be a great time for you to talk about active awareness as a tool to begin to move out, or how to break this pattern.
Yes, active awareness to me is the art of personal observation, is being in the moment and paying attention at all times as to what's going on around you, because most of the time we are living in our heads and we are not really being in the present, being in the moment. We are acting out of reactivity, on autopilot, and we don't really know, we don't realize that that's what we're doing. So to me, active awareness is that ability to be in the moment and to be paying attention of what's going on in your thoughts, because that's where everything happens and that's where everything gets built, in your thoughts. So active awareness is, and I have created a couple of exercises that people can use to realize what they're doing to themselves and come back to the present and develop that habit of being able to catch themselves when they're on autopilot, when they're not living in the present or from their authentic selves. So I recommend an exercise that I call the 60-60-30 snap, where every 60 minutes, you set an alarm, and it can be your phone, it could be your watch, or whatever alarm works for you.
We can set our phone, right?
Right. It was this idea came to me from something we did in church, where they had these little really cheapo watches. They were all given to us. And every 60 seconds we would pray at the same time. They were synchronized. I'm like, oh, that's a great idea to bring things to your mind and your awareness. Yeah. So every 60 seconds, the alarm goes off, and then you stop.
Right.
Every 60 minutes,
right,
the alarm goes
that's
off.
That's a lot of praying.
Yeah. So every hour, every 60 minutes, the alarm goes off, and you stop and you notice what you're thinking. Right. And then you analyze it. Where am I? What am I thinking? What am I feeling? And where is this thought coming from? And how is this making me feel? Is there some other thought or feeling that would make me feel better? And then you come back to the present. And you come back to the present moment. And you do that every 60 minutes for 60 seconds for a period of 30 days. And you will notice as you go throughout the day, how often you are having a fight with your spouse in your head, or agonizing about something you have to do for work, or you're just caught in trance while your food is burning. You're just not noticing. And once you realize what you're doing, you can catch yourself and stop and choose something different for yourself.
Oh my goodness. There's no way that would not be completely effective and life-changing. I mean, what you're talking about is this like forced awakening, this forced like interruption of our mindless behavior, which is we're not bad. That's how our brain likes to put things into habits. And so that we're doing, 90% of what we do is habitual, but to take that break and just check in. I love that idea, the 60-60-30, check in to see like, how am I feeling? And I very much am all my coaching is in alignment with the thoughts that we are thinking create the way we're feeling. So what am I thinking? And I really appreciate that you say then, is there, a different thought I could be thinking, or how is that thought making me feel? Is it really helping me worry and ruminate over something I have no control over? My son getting on the soccer team in 2 months, whatever it is.
Whatever.
Yeah. And then I also love how you add in the 30 days, because it's something small, but then you have that extended period of time to build that new habit so the brain can get in the habit of being more mindful.
That's right. And it works. And you're going to find that at first you're going to be habituated. You're going to remain in your old patterns, but then you're going to start catching yourself. And then you're going to be catching yourself more often, and you're going to get in trouble, and you might catch yourself as you're doing something habitual without thinking about it. Mm-hmm. And then over time, you're going to find that you're going to catch yourself before you get in trouble.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. That's how I started. I had a very, very loud inner critic in my head. And that is how I started shutting her down and just saying, you're no longer welcome in my head. Thank you very much. And it was that, I remember my therapist once was like, write down every negative thought you have. And I was like, there is not enough paper. What are you talking about? But I reluctantly started doing it. And then, just that awareness of, oh my gosh, there I go again, or, oh my God. And that almost the effort of writing it down was like, all right, I'm just going to stop thinking this because it's no longer helpful.
Yeah, it's repetitive when you think about it. It's always the same thoughts recycled.
Yes. And when we're thinking it, we're going to feel the same way. So how might this help in a relationship that is maybe, not fulfilling or sort of at that place where it's not that, you might have married out of convenience or whatever, because you thought you were in love at the time, but following programming because you're picking, that little person that looked pretty good at that moment, but then moving on, it's not feeling as good. How might something like this or active awareness help with that?
Well, active awareness is especially helpful when it comes to certain patterns that you engage in that are damaging to your relationship. For instance, when you're on autopilot and you react instead of responding to the interactions with your spouse. For example, let's say your spouse does something that you dislike, and you might be telling yourself a story in your head. For example, I'm married to the Marlboro Man. He just walks in and he's very silent, and you might start telling yourself stories like, oh my God, it's something I did. It was this, it was that. And you start creating that story that it's disturbing you and robbing your peace. And it's making you interact with your partner in a way that might not be helpful. Maybe your partner had a bad day and needs to decompress, doesn't want to talk right now. Mm-hmm. So instead you're telling yourself something else, and you're going to catch yourself also reacting. Like if you're in the middle of a fight, you may be able to step back instead of firing back, which is what many of us do. And I catch myself after the fact very often. Yeah. That you fire back and you react on autopilot. And it may not really have anything to do with what you're fighting about. It might be something else. It's usually about something else, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's that deeper thing, which is, not bringing out the trash. You're fighting over the trash. And what it really is that you don't feel heard. You asked him to bring it out this morning, and it's this deeper feeling that, you don't matter. But getting to those points, I really like it. I also really appreciate what you're saying in terms of the drama we make up in our head, that he walks in, he's quiet, you or whomever immediately goes to think, oh God, they're mad at me, they're upset, there's this going on. Or like, oh, he's always so quiet, he never talks. And it's this story in your head. And I always say, like, when in doubt, shout it out, get it out in the room.
I love it.
Where are you mad at me? Like, did you have a bad day? What's going on? Say it, get it out there, have that awareness and that interruption.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's really helpful. One thing, shifting gears a little bit, because the active awareness is wonderful. And that is something that I encourage people to get your book. And which book was that in? You've written several books.
It's actually on both, because I think it's really important. And if I were to write another book on another subject, I still would include active awareness, because it's so fundamental to happiness.
It is. Because we have to just put that, if we're on this treadmill of life, we have to put the crowbar in there to stop the treadmill. So we're like, wait, what's going on? Am I just repeating these patterns and moving on indefinitely? And I guess it's not exactly changing gears, but what I do like that you bring up is how in these interactions, when we get to maybe this waking up period of our life and we look at our marriage and we're thinking, yeah, no, this isn't good enough. This actually, I would like something more. Just because this was okay for my parents or my girlfriends or my, doesn't mean it's okay for me. But then you speak a lot of the importance of taking responsibility for your own actions in your side of the road. Could you speak a little bit about that?
Absolutely. I think it's really easy to say, oh, my husband did this and it's so offensive. And okay, it may be offensive, but it's really important to look at yourself and examine what you're doing that might make a bad situation worse.
Mm.
So instead of reacting the same way, I invite readers to pay attention to what they're doing, how they're interacting with their spouses, and see if there's anything they're doing that it's making things worse, how they contribute to the strife in the relationship, and to try something else for a little bit. I think often people give up on their marriages too soon, or without trying enough, or without examining the relationship enough. And often 50% of people who initiate divorces feel divorce regret. And I think that's a terrible place to find yourself in. So I think it's really helpful to instead try something different for a little bit and see if that makes a difference.
I didn't realize it was that high, 50%. And I do of divorce regret and I imagine that comes from, just too quickly sort of calling it and saying that, because I have heard, the other statistic that by the time women ask men to go to counseling, it's 7 years too late that and so what we're trying to do is catch them in that first period, or even the 7 years later, when it is that like, okay, well, what could you do differently? And what might shift, if you've always done it that way, shift it, what's 180 degrees that you could, something completely different that you could do. And also, just so much of it for me in ending my first marriage was just giving it all I had to see if, okay, well, what's the harm? Laying down my ego, like it doesn't have to be he's right or I'm right, but let me just lay it down. Let me see if this is going to work. And then I definitely, by the time our fourth marriage counselor said, like he fired us, I felt very clear saying, I've done everything I could. This is fine. And not having that divorce regret. But I think so much of it comes from looking internally and seeing what's my role in this. It takes two to tango. And even though I, at the time, could have had many diagnoses for my ex that, maybe could have been verified by the psychological institution, at the same time, I was in it. And I had, moved through it for 26 years and played a role. And it was very helpful for me, certainly looking back, to be aware of my behaviors and my role in that. I am certainly not saying in terms of, a physically abusive, but I was in an emotionally and verbally abusive marriage, but I still I put up with it. It is part of that patterning. So I like having that ability. It feels empowering too, to see like, okay, what can I change? What has my role been? And where can I make sure that I'm giving it my all?
That's right. And not only that, it's also important to have that awareness so that you don't repeat those same patterns in future relationships, because you're having that dress rehearsal for the next one. And if you don't come to terms with what you're doing, what you're tolerating, how you ended up in the relationship too, because why we couple up might be a big factor as to why we pick the wrong people.
I love, there's some quote that's like, you marry your unfinished business, or your, to heal your childhood wounds, or whatever and I see that. And that is another part of your work that I just love, because you really do emphasize the importance of, when going through this period of, waking up and looking at your relationship and deciding whether you're going to, mend it or end it or stay in or go, the importance of professional help, of a coach or a therapist to be that sort of, non-judgmental eye and helping you with that, while also speaking to the importance that I don't hear as much, but the importance of the relationship with self in terms of, really digging into yourself and what you're telling yourself about yourself, but then also your own programming and your self-awareness and what your tendencies are. And what that was hugely helpful for me after my divorce. I didn't date or have the urge to date for many years.
Me too.
Oh my gosh, I was like a wounded little pup. Like I didn't even think of it. and I think it's that like wounded puppy. And one of the most important things I did, and one of the things that I love about your work, is emphasizing that importance of learning about self. Could you speak a little more about that?
Yeah, it's really important to understand yourself before. I mean, if you're already in the relationship and you're having problems, it is always a good time to explore yourself, how you ended up with this person, why? Is it because of my insecurities? Is it because I was told I have to be married? Is it because I picked the wrong person because this is who I was dating when my biological clock was about to explode, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we need to develop that self-awareness. And another part of the self-awareness that I think is really key is, what is your purpose and what do you want to create with your life, and how you and your partner can create it together. And if you cannot, you need to honor your own desires and your own purpose and your own mission in life, because we're here to be self-realized. Mm-hmm. So there's all these different aspects of self that need to be explored. And after the relationship is over, I think exploring that is critical before you end up in another relationship, because like I said before, you're going to be repeating those patterns, mm-hmm. or you're going to be attracting the wrong person.
Yeah, you're going to be attracting more people in there to fix those wounds that you haven't healed. I very much believe that. And both repeating patterns, not setting boundaries, not sticking up for self. And when you're talking about, purpose and plan for life and this self-actualization, my experience is many women are putting that on the back burner and instead, self-abandoning and putting other people's needs before theirs until they do the cycle again and they feel like they're going to explode and they feel flat and misunderstood. You had a wonderful term, the failed marriage myth, that I had not heard of before. And then when I read it, I was like, oh, yeah. Can you speak about what the failed marriage myth is and how people can maybe reverse that myth or generate feelings of success when they're moving through a divorce?
Yes. And this is something people use the word failed relationship or failed marriage. And I subscribe to Wayne Dyer's philosophy that there is no such thing as failure. You only achieve a result. But we're told, society tells us that if your marriage ends, it's a failure and that you are a failure. And one thing that was really eye-opening for me was an expert in the publishing field talking about her failed marriage and the feelings of failure. And I'm thinking to myself, this is someone who's so incredibly accomplished that so many people look up to, feeling like a failure. And you're not a failure. You simply picked the wrong partner, and that partner was put in your life for a reason.
Yeah, I don't even subscribe to it's the wrong partner. I'm just, he was the right partner for me at the time to learn what I needed to learn.
Exactly. Exactly.
I certainly wouldn't choose him today, but at the time, it's sort of the Wayne Dyer thing again. Like I chose the exact right partner that I was supposed to choose to learn the lesson I was meant to learn.
And teach the partner as well.
Yes.
You were in that person's life for a reason. So you were there co-creating something. And then when it's time to move on, it's not a failure. Mm. You're extract your lessons and move on. Mm. And I invite people to, instead of feeling like a failure, start generating feelings of success. Start thinking about not what I'm losing or what was wrong, but what do I want to create from this point on? And start. Don't wait for the divorce judgment. Start in this moment to start creating that life that is in alignment with whom you want to be and what you deserve.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, because gets back to the thoughts. If you think it's a failure, then you feel, sad and like it is a failure. I did not. I was so proud of my divorce. I was so proud that I had the guts to stop generational patterns of this dysfunction and stand up as a single mom of 3 boys, go out on my own, no financial back. And I very much, I got that message of, people told me I was going to rot in hell, and I was, divorces. And I just was like, are you kidding? And I remember doing an Instagram post saying divorce is not a tragedy. A tragedy is staying in a marriage and modeling that for my kids. Like me modeling that was a normal way of intimacy in marriage, to me, is the tragedy. So I loved reading about this failed marriage myth, because I know that stops many women, that what are people going to say and what are people going to think? And yet I think at some point you get so desperate that you're just like, okay, people are going to think what they're going to think. I need to take care of myself. I wonder, have you looked into that at all in terms of the feeling of failure, whether it's the person who leaves or the person who's left? Or
I think it goes both ways. I think it's the fact that you did not keep your marriage together.
Yeah, I get it's
I
just
think that is
that thought. Yeah, like if you think it's a failure, you could have, there are definitely, like, to me, in my mind, I'm like, we went to 4 marriage therapists. I did my best, but someone could be like, we went to 14. That's not enough, So it gets back to the power of the thoughts, and what we're thinking creates how we feel. And also in the abusive relationships, just in terms of feeling like a failure. You can feel like a failure no matter what. You can feel like a failure because there are days where I'm like, I can't believe I stayed in for that long. And that could feel like a failure. Or, it is for us to all come back and have the professional support that can help us make sure that we are choosing thoughts that are empowering and uplifting and moving us forward, so that we can heal from this sort of thing. Speaking of that, could you speak a little about forgiveness and the power of forgiveness of those former spouses, or of the person you're choosing to still stay married to?
Forgiveness is the portal to the future. Desmond Tutu said, without forgiveness, there is no future. So if you want to have peace and joy and rebuild your life, you need to forgive. And if you end a marriage, I am sure there are plenty of wrongs to go around, to be blamed for and blame others for. And you need to release them if you want to be happy. The fact that you hold on to all these wrongs does not make you superior. We get some juice from not forgiving others. Mm-hmm. And you need to identify what's the juice you're getting from it. And also understand that it's holding you back. It's not allowing you to be free, because instead of using your energy to rebuild your life, you're using it to recreate and relive all the bad things that happen in your marriage, or to hold grudges against people who you think might have contributed to the demise of your marriage, whether it's, family, not just your spouse, but the in-laws, the other woman or the other man. And you need to release that. And it's not about condoning the behaviors. It's about releasing the charge and the hurt that is causing you, because every time you think about it and you relive that situation, you're hurting yourself.
Oh, there's such good examples that you're bringing up, and I, your emphasis on the energy, and I think of emotions as energy and motion. So if you have this energy of anger and resentment and frustration towards this person, like say there is another woman involved, you're feeling all this over here. Like, what is she feeling in this very moment? She's probably sitting and watching Netflix, or she's feeling none of that. Yet we feel so vindicated, like, oh, she did the wrong thing, and you're the only one getting hurt. I did a podcast episode once on forgiveness, and I think the definition is, no longer to forgive is to no longer feel anger and resentment towards whomever, to no longer feel that anger and resentment. It doesn't mean that you have to call up that woman and be like, yeah, you did the right thing. It doesn't even involve the other person. It's just us coming to terms with, okay, this happened. How long do I want to hold on to it?
Exactly.
I really appreciate how you say it's not about condoning the behavior or being that doormat, like, oh yeah, that's fine. It's great. No, you can have the thought that it was not the correct action or, but how do you want to feel about it?
Exactly. You have a choice.
Mm.
And it's a personal choice. You don't have to see it as something that you're giving to others. It's something that you're choosing for your own benefit. And we do it in all areas of our lives. And you're cheating yourself of so much joy and happiness. I will never forget, there was this older gentleman who was very accomplished and very active in public life for many generations. And he was honored. And they had this very big shindig on his, in his name, and God only knows, all these dignitaries were there, but he was so upset that his brother didn't show up, that he could not enjoy all that recognition and all the appreciation and all the love that he was receiving. What a terrible loss.
Yeah. Oh, it's so sad. Yeah. And then yet you can see, it's like, the coach in me is like, you can see his little boy self, like just craving attention for that brother. And it's like, he's not going to give it to you. Just let him be him, move through your life. It's so sad. And again, just a testament to why healing ourselves, knowing about ourselves, getting over our core wounds is really such a fundamental piece of living a life that we love, which is the name of this podcast. So if there were a listener out there who is feeling maybe a little woken up today, a little bit like, yeah, you know what, that's been me. I definitely have been following the programming. I've been doing what I said I should do. And, I'm not feeling happy. I'm questioning whether, isn't there more than this? I'm feeling stuck in my marriage. Is there a place you could direct them, or is there something, what would you suggest? How would they start shifting out of some of their patterns?
I think you need to engage in the self-reflection because, and we're always looking for the answers outside. The answers are all within, and we all possess the wisdom to get to those answers. We all have everything we need to be equipped. We're equipped to do whatever we want with our lives, but we need to accept that. We need to recognize that we have that ability and tap into our intuition. So to me, self-reflection is the key to getting there, to understanding how we got to where we are, and then have the tools to create the future from now on, what we choose to create. And that's what I do in my books. I just guide the readers so they can ask themselves those questions. I don't provide anyone the answers because everyone has their own set of answers. So I offer the reflections, and people can just walk through their lives, where they've been, how they got there, and how they can create what they want based on what they really wish to do. So they can rediscover their passions and their joy, and how they have deprived themselves, because very often we find ourselves in these situations because we are in the career that our parents chose for us. The family business that we have to continue working for, even though we'd rather not. We need to find out where we lost ourselves. And very often it's in the couple, because we think that, we have to become one at the expense of who you are, what your dreams are, what makes you happy. And we just need to find those pieces.
Oh yeah, I feel like we lose it at like age 9 in this culture, where it's very much like, no, be a good girl, be a people pleaser, and then it just builds on itself into that coupledom. And yes, so I really appreciate that. And this self-reflection, if listeners are hearing self-reflection and then missing, like, well, how do we do that? What I'm hearing is that, get your book, go through that. There are many questions in there and guided, exercises. And if you're a journaler, that's how I love doing it, sort of reflecting back on like what was modeled for me in marriage, what happened when my parents fought, or did my parents never fight? What are my feelings about intimate? Just starting to get to know yourself. And this goes back to what you were saying, is that most important relationship is the one we have with ourselves.
Exactly.
And whether you are staying in the marriage and working on yourself, I have seen that marriage change and be something different, or you're choosing to end it. And, both, in all instances, we all benefit from learning about ourselves. So I really appreciate that.
Absolutely. And journaling is the best tool.
I love it. I resist it at times. And then it's like that inner Susie in me that's like, and then I just start writing and I'm like, oh, right. Relax into it. Well, Sonia, if listeners want to get in touch with you and could you tell us a little bit about what you have coming up and toot your own horn a little here?
Sure. Listeners are welcome to get to know me better. The best way to connect with me is through my website, soniafrontera.com. And there you will find more information. You'll find links to my social media, as well as my books, any podcasts such as this. Get to listen to episodes and find out about upcoming events I have coming up in October. It's Domestic Violence Awareness Month, so there will be a number of talks and live events. So sign up for my newsletter and you will get access to all the programs that are coming up, as well as some freebies.
Wonderful. I will have that all linked in my show notes here too. And this will be airing in October, early October. That's, I think, the first October. I just want to give the listeners an episode number they can go to. So it's www.smbwell.com/166. So October 13th, it will be airing, and we can get all those links to the books, to the lives, to the episodes. The lives might have happened in the first part of the month, but the second part of the month of domestic violence awareness, we can cue in on. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been a pleasure.
Been wonderful. Thanks.